So what's a probate bond, and how does getting one or not getting one affect the service you give to your customer or to your attorney or to a family that's looking to get bonded? I'm really excited to have today a professional, Phil Pavarini, who's a probate court bonds. ProbateCourtBond.com is the website. He is a probate bond provider. He is an agency in 4 states. He brokers bonds throughout the country. And I had a chance to, a couple of times now to talk to him. I was introduced to him by a mutual friend. And when I talk about probate bonds, Phil, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm just curious, how'd you end up in the probate court bond business? As you're a little boy, were you playing with dolls saying, someday I'm going to grow up and do probate bonds, or how that happened?
Well, that's an interesting question, Bill. It was a little bit by accident. About 20 years ago, I had just gotten out of the Army Reserves training, and I did not want to be a police officer, so I started a private investigative company.
Oh, wow.
In doing that, I couldn't find insurance for less than an arm and a leg. And I ran across an insurance carrier that had great coverage. And at that time, I decided to become licensed as an agent because I was so upset with my insurance agent. So one thing led to another. We did a process service and mortgage foreclosures for a good decade. We were doing about 3/4 of all the process service in our county, in Cuyahoga County, all through the mid-2000s, which was quite a big volume. And one thing led to another, got into probate, and I found that while we were actually in surety bail bonds, I found that really there were no agents out there that were focusing on probate. So it just seemed like a big carve out that wasn't being addressed. And here in Cleveland, we have a few firms, agencies that offer probate bonds, and they just don't service them. They're exactly like you describe in LA. Exactly. I mean, I get clients, new attorneys every day call, and they say, we can't get a reply from our agent. We've been sending requests, and we don't hear back from them, and we're just not important to them anymore. And they almost exactly what you described earlier. So that's what we do is we take the process and we make it streamlined, since we're familiar with probate. It's not something we do once a year. We do it, dozens of times a week or more. And so that's how I became a probate bond guy.
And that's how I got interested. I would have attorneys come across who might do 1 or 2 probates a year, and they just didn't have the knowledge specifically with the vendors or the pull with the vendor to get things done. And, I might do 10, 20 probate cases in LA County as a realtor. And I said, well, I know how to get the bonds done, and I know several vendors, and let me help you get it done for the customer. I don't get paid to do that. I get paid to help my customers. I get paid to help the attorneys. And so that's what's caused me to step in. And I think nationally, there's probably a lot of these opportunities. Just to take off the table real quick, now you're in Cuyahoga, which is Cleveland. I've been there, so I know Cuyahoga County a bit. But you're an agent in 4 states, but you also can broker in all 50 states probate bonds, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We are licensed in Ohio, Indiana, Michigan. We're just adding Florida, and we're in the process of New York and New Jersey. So for bonds outside of that area, we submit those to an agent licensed in whatever state it happens to be in. So for those, the applications can still be submitted on our website, but we can answer general questions, but we can't answer specific questions for areas outside of our licensure.
Okay. And obviously, if somebody had a high volume request, a number of cases, they wanted to consider you as a vendor, they could talk to you and you could put together a game plan with your agent, I guess, in that other state if need be. So let's talk about the challenges of probate bonds. One of the things is cost. Obviously, people, nobody goes through life saying, I would have the world's best probate bond. I want the higher value one. I want this. They all focus on the cost. So of course, as a business person, lower revenue might mean lower service. How do you manage that trade-off between cost and revenue?
Yeah, and that's a common question as far as the cost of the probate bonds. The first thing I always like folks to remind folks whenever we're discussing fees or premium in relation to probate bonds is the only reason a probate bond would be needed is if there are assets to cover the cost of that bond. So it's not like a lot of folks, they say, well, we can't afford it. Well, you can't afford it because the estate has that funding. So that cost is not really, sometimes there are challenges in getting the funds liquid. So
Right.
sometimes you might have a huge piece of real estate and there's no funds at all. But generally speaking, the costs are often they're even advanced by some law firms will advance the fee. In some areas, that's restricted in some cases. In some states, they don't allow that premium to be advanced, but there's different ways to handle that. One of the other big questions we get in relation to the cost is, why do I have to have this bond? That's one of, even before we get to cost. And the bond really, what it does, it's protecting the estate and making sure that the estate is going to be handled according to law and the legal requirements. So one of those requirements are generally that you have an attorney. So there are not a whole lot of bonding companies that are going to write a bond for a executor or an administrator unless they have an attorney or prior experience. And folks say, well, why do I need an attorney? I don't want to pay for an attorney. And we go back to the same thing. If there was not funds in the estate to pay for that attorney, or equity, then it wouldn't be needed to begin with. But the attorney is really going to protect the principal and the estate.
Right. And I find oftentimes that, there's more effective options, in a standard probate or one with a lot of assets, you might need an attorney that you know and trust. But if it's just a one-time transaction, there's attorneys who specialize in this. Their costs are lower because they do it in volume. And that's where I try to step in and help customers find the right solution for their particular case. So as a real estate agent, my interest in this is oftentimes I found that attorneys would pick the probate bond company because they were doing something that I could do as well, like picking up documents at court or delivering documents, the final orders and things like that. And obviously, you're not going to be able to do that in all jurisdictions because you're not doing there. But to me, that creates opportunity for the real estate agent to create the relationship and earn the relationship with the attorney on giving a better service as a bond, as well as in some cases, though, you have customers who may not qualify, but for the attorney. And I know you and I spoke about this, that you do offer, and it's obviously case by case, where a bond application for a individual who's not, quote, bondable, doesn't have good credit, doesn't have good income, might be approved if the attorney is able to both sign on to the bond as well as to manage a custodial account. Talk a little bit about how that widens the net of opportunity for families to get bonded.
Mm-hmm. Sure. In some states, and it does not happen very often in Ohio, in some states, there are things like custodial accounts, or they will have co-executors named on the case where the attorney is one of those co-executors. In practice, most bonding companies will not approve that. So most bonding companies that we work with, they're not real favorable on co-signers. You either are approved or you're not approved. Some cases we might have where there are two siblings that are co-administrators or some circumstances like that. But as far as obtaining a bond, unless you're without being qualified, that's something that's challenging. And it's a lot of times it's better to find a different applicant than try to finagle a bond, because it's going to be so costly to get that other bonding company to approve you that it would just be much less hassle and cost just to get that alternative applicant.
But sometimes that's a choice the customer can make, like a higher price bond or a lower price. But if they want to pay the higher price to get bonded with the attorney, that's something that you can offer with custodial accounts sometimes?
Sure. Sometimes it is not often that those are approved.
Right.
We do try them often, but
right.
There aren't a whole lot of carriers that will accept that scenario.
Got it.
So, ideally probate bonds, you mentioned price, and probate bonds typically are not something that consumers shop, like
Correct.
your home and auto insurance. If I'm going to get my home and auto, I'm going to try 3, 4, 5 different carriers. With probate, every time you submit a new application to another carrier, you're probably going to have another hit on your credit. So you're not necessarily going to get any better pricing, and you're going to wind up with a half dozen, credit inquiries, and it's going to tank your credit score and all that. So that's why it's incredibly important to work with an agent that's familiar with the different pricing and requirements.
Got it. Now, I know you have a website that people can go to and is informative. And then do you have customers actually apply on the website to get the bonds, or is it just more of a contact experience? And then you or your staffer, because I see apply now. Wow, that's great. You can just click and apply for a bond online. Is that really, do you take the applications that way? Is that a regular part of your business?
Yeah, it sure is. And I'll tell you something that we ran across, and we just recently added a PDF form. So you'll see right at the top of that application, there's an option to click and download the PDF form. Mm-hmm. So we'll accept applications either way. These are very specialized applications that we've been developing over the last 15, 16 years. So if these applications, either the online form or the PDF, if they're fully completed with everything it's asking for, we typically don't have any additional questions. So what we found with other carriers and with the carrier applications is there's always follow-up questions. And sometimes they could go on for a long time, days or weeks. Right. And that's just because some questions are always omitted. And that's what we've developed on our applications is that they're concise and they ask for everything. The second thing that's helpful with those PDF applications is we recommend that when attorneys, they usually have an intake packet for their firm. We recommend that attorneys take our PDF form and they include that in their PDF or in their intake packet, regardless of whether or not there's a bond known to be required or not.
I agree so much. Why not just get it done already?
That's going to do a few things. One is an attorney's legally allowed to ask for that information, but they wouldn't necessarily ask for everything that's on our application during their intake. So it's actually almost kind of an investigative tool. Yep. Find out more about your client on the front end when you're intaking a case. And that could also give the attorney some indication of whether they're going to apply or qualify for a bond, down the road.
I could not agree more that I'm pushing attorneys I work with to get the bond application completed ahead of time so we have it. Whether we need it or not, that's a different question. But if we do need it, now it's done already and we can send it off. And I think the customer expects that to be done without another level of application. I think that's to me expected in the customer experience. So I really appreciate that. Look, Phil, I really appreciate the time to chat with you today. Obviously, anybody can get more information at probatecourtbond.com. Gosh, it's so easy. I don't know why I fumbled on that. But it's a great service. You are able to service 50 states. You're an agent of 4 and broker out the rest. I know you do other insurance as well, but you're obviously very experienced in probate bond. I appreciate you bringing your expertise. My goal of this call, I have to tell you, I'd searched out to talk to 4 or 5 different probate bond reps at probably 3 or 4 different companies. And it just seems like an area they just don't want to talk about. I'm not sure what that's about, but I do know that the more we learn, the better we can service our customers, our attorneys, and be more valuable. So thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, Bill.